Hello, I can see people starting to come into the lobby, so I will get ready to share my screen. Good morning and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us at this webinar where we'll be talking about the 2024 Australian Service Excellence Awards. It's a great pleasure to be with you all today, and thank you very much for giving us some of your time. I'd like to quickly give a quick shout out and say hello to my co-panelist today, Luke Jamieson. Hello, Luke. How are you today?
Good, Jeremy. G'day, everyone. Good to be here.
Great to have you on board, Luke. And we also have May Tan from CSIA's Client Services team hovering in the background today, and she'll be monitoring the chat for any questions, and she'll also be putting some files and links into the chat as we go along to help you on your way in this year's program. So again, I'd like to thank you all very much for coming along today. This is the way that we've been formally launching the Australian Service Excellence Awards program for the last 3 years now with a webinar. And this is the first time we've had one of our expert judges and a CX thought leader in Luke Jamieson join this session as well. So thanks again to Luke. The awards, as CSIA, we are really honoured to run the Australian Service Excellence Awards program. It is the 24th year the awards have been running this year, and it's absolutely at the core of what we do at CSIA. So recognising, celebrating, rewarding great and exceptional customer service is just at the heart of what we do, and we love the fact that all of you are really on board with recognising and celebrating those who do great things too. And it goes to say without saying that what gets celebrated, what gets rewarded, gets repeated. So let's get on with the show. So today we're going to be looking at an overview of the program this year, how it's going to roll. We're going to look at the categories, the entry process, key dates, judging criteria. Then Luke has got in a really exciting segment where he's going to share his insights as a judge for many years on the awards program. So what makes an award-winning presentation, but he's also going to tell us a little bit about how storytelling can create an award-winning presentation. So really looking forward to hearing from Luke about that. And then hopefully we'll have some time at the end for all of your questions. So please put any questions that you have into the chat. This session is being recorded, so we will be running the session on our website at a later time as well. We'll be showing some of our previous award winners as we go along today and celebrating them again. And so in this particular slide, we have Centurino Technologies, who were the 2021 Best of the Best. Centurino have won awards at the Australian Service Excellence Awards every year since 2013. They've won something, and Adam Centurino has twice been Executive of the Year. So they are an organisation who are constantly growing, constantly evolving, and one that I encourage you to reach out to if you want to really learn how to build a customer-centric culture. So let's move forward now and look at the actual program overview for this year. Pretty straightforward, really. There's 4 parts. Nominations. So nominations actually opened on February the 1st, and they go all the way until May the 31st. So plenty of time to think about your nomination for this year, whether it's going to be an individual, whether it's going to be a team, a whole organisation, a contact centre, or a project. Think about that nomination, put together your entry and submit it. And I'll go through the actual entry process a little bit later on. We'll be shortlisting finalists by June the 10th. So once again, a very short time frame for the judging panel to put together the finalists. So there's a committee that the CSIA board puts together each year. It consists of our lead judge, Daniel Larkins, myself, and then some other judges from our community, and they go through all the categories and shortlist from all of our entries the finalists. Typically, they're around about 90 finalists in total. Some years a little more, some years a little less. We have a criteria to have at least 3 finalists and a maximum of 5 finalists per category. So, and we do try to recognise and celebrate as many people as we can. So where we can find the calibre to create 5 finalists, we will. Finalist presentations will then be conducted between July and August. So each finalist that is selected will then have the opportunity to present to a panel of CSIA judges. So CSIA judges are members of our community, someone like Luke. They're all customer experience and customer service experts. Many are awards alumni. Others are CSIA members and other CX and industry thought leaders. We divide the judging panel into groups of 2s and 3s, and they go around the country, and our finalists present their organisational awards in person or online like this, whereas our individuals are all interviewed in an online setting. So everyone goes through a finalist presentation. They'll take place between July and August. Again, like last year, there'll be a 90-minute time allocation for an organisational category, 60 minutes for a project category, and 60 minutes for an individual category. So plenty of time for you to show your case, and hopefully you'll pick up some tips from Luke later on today about how to make that presentation really hum. And then we'll be announcing the winners on October the 24th at our annual Australian Service Excellence Awards Gala. If you watch our social, you'll know where that is. But if you don't know where it is, I'll be showing you later on in today's presentation. But we're very excited about the venue that we've selected to host this year's Australian Service Excellence Awards, which is, as I'm sure Luke would agree, one of the biggest nights on the customer service calendar in Australia every year. So let's have a look at the categories for this year. So the same categories as we've had for the last few years: Advocate of the Year, Professional of the Year, Leader of the Year, Manager of the Year, and Executive of the Year. And I just want to go through those very briefly, just to give you a little bit of context about what each one really relates to. So if you're thinking about nominating an individual or yourself, you can have a bit more understanding about what that is. So for our advocates, we're looking for someone that's not necessarily a frontline customer service professional, but they could be. There's someone here could be from any part of the organisation and any role within an organisation. It could even be the CEO, but there's someone who has demonstrated in their role a real heart for the customer, and they've gone about encouraging your organisation to become more customer-centric. It could be through an initiative, it could be through a project, or it could just be the work they're doing as part of their daily role. So someone that really advocating for customers. In some organisations we work with, there are people who are called customer advocates, and it could be one of those as well. The Professional of the Year is for a frontline team member, someone who's dealing with customers, whether that's over the phone or face-to-face or both. Maybe it is only through web chat or email, but it's someone who's in a frontline role dealing with customers every day, and that's the core part of their role. The Leader of the Year is for someone who's at a team leader, supervisor type level, who is managing or leading a team of frontline service professionals. So typically in a call center, it would be a team leader. Out in the field at a retail branch, it might be the retail branch manager. So someone who is directly leading frontline service professionals. Manager is someone who is managing a customer service function or a business function that has internal or external service outcomes. So the Manager of the Year will typically have a number of leaders and a number of team members reporting indirectly or directly through to them, managing a department, managing a division, managing perhaps a broader function as well within the organisation. They could even be a project manager or even someone who's been seconded into a management role. And then the Executive of the Year is someone who is from your senior leadership team, so C-suite. In the government, it might be Assistant Commissioner, Executive General Manager, those sorts of roles. So someone who is at the very highest levels of leadership within your organisation. Doesn't have to be the CEO, but it's quite often someone from the C-suite type of area. Last year's Executive of the Year, we can see listed there Grant Brodie from the Australian Taxation Office. Actually, Grant rang me this week to wish us well on this webinar. Grant is an Assistant Commissioner. So that sort of level of person would be perfectly suitable to be put forward as Executive of the Year. Then for our organisational categories, and if you do have questions, guys, please do pump them into the chat, and we will try to get to all of your questions at the end. For the Organisation of the Year, there are 4 main categories. First of all, the Organisation of the Year itself, and there's large, medium, small, and government not-for-profit subcategories under this section. So large, 500 or more employees; medium, 90 to 500 employees. So that's where Centrino Technologies would land. Small, less than 90 employees, and then government not-for-profit. Now, Striker International, that we've got listed there, they were a large organisation winner in 2018, and they also won Best of the Best that year. They're an international organisation. You might be from a global or international organisation. As long as you're serving Australian customers, you're eligible to enter the Australian Service Excellence Awards. So you could even have a call centre that's based offshore servicing Australian customers. That's perfectly eligible to be entered in the Australian Service Excellence Awards. Now, it just so happens that Stryker has a beautiful office up in North Sydney, but they are a global organisation. So I thought I'd just mention that. So government not-for-profit, so we're typically getting, around about, local government, state government, and federal government all enter into that category. And then the not-for-profit sector is very strong in Australia. And we have recent winners include from Australian Red Cross Lifeblood, who won an award last year, who are not-for-profit. Last year's actual winner of that category was the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator, who'd been runner-up in the category the year before. So that's the Organisation of the Year award, very popular category, probably the blue ribbon category in terms of the awards. And so we're looking forward to seeing who enters that this year. Then there's the Team of the Year, large, medium, small. We don't sort of classify them in terms of numbers immediately. We wait and see sort of the entries that we get. The customer service team is a team of people, could be 2 people, could be 1, I suppose. 2 people, could be 2,000 people, but they are grouped as a team with a common goal and function. Sometimes it's a team that might be based in multiple locations. Sometimes it's a team that's based in one location, or perhaps all working remotely or from home. But they're designated as a team. Typically small is under 10, medium is somewhere between 10 and 30, and large is over 30. But it does depend year on year, the sort of caliber and the number of entries that we get into that team category. Again, a very popular category, and we encourage people to really put forward as many teams as possible for the awards, because it's a really good way of, often teams of people really work in a concentrated one on a certain goal or function, and sometimes not necessarily as visibly as we might like in terms of the organisation. So it's a great way of recognising those teams that are working really hard in the background to deliver an exceptional customer outcome.
Hey, Jeremy, we've got a really good question.
A really good
question. Which is the size of the organisation, size based on the organisation or on the contact centre? So is the size of the organisational based on the contact centre size or the whole of the organisation?
So we have a separate contact centre category which we're about to pop into, but for the organisation award, it's based on total employees for that organisation or full-time equivalents within that organisation. So we're looking at being 500 for large, 90 to 500 for medium, and under 90 for small. For a contact centre, and we'll just click into the next slide, Service Excellence and Contact Centre, there's large, medium, and small. And I've just been given the categories, how they're going to designate that this year. So if you want to make a note, large for contact centre this year will be considered with 100 or more full-time equivalent seats. Medium will be considered 20 to 100 FTE, and small will be under 20 this year. So that's how they're going to designate contact centre this year. So if you're thinking about entering your contact centre, you would look at small, medium, and large based on that criteria. If you're looking at entering an organisational award, then you would look at the total number of employees in your organisation. I hope that answers the question. I did see another hand up, Luke. Was that? Or should I just push power on? Contact centres, we receive numerous entries into contact centres awards every year, and we're really excited about that. And one thing I love in my role is going around and visiting contact centres, because they're just always just such a buzz of just customer-focused activity. So I'm looking forward to doing that again this year. And HCF actually won the 2022 Best of the Best. I don't know if they won it for their contact centre, but they have won the contact centre category before. HCF actually, interestingly, are the only organisation to win Best of the Best twice. So they won in 2013 and again in 2022. So I don't know if anyone's from HCF today, but they've always been a remarkable performer in the Australian Service Excellence Awards. So the last of the organisation categories is the Project of the Year, and these are always super popular because when you think about putting together an awards entry, it's really easy to tell a project story. We had this problem, we thought about it, we designed this solution, we implemented it, these are the results, and this is what we've learned. It's a really easy story to tell, and I think that's one of the reasons that people put forward a lot of project entries into the awards program. We break them into 4 subcategories based on continuous improvement, customer impact, service innovation, and service transformation. You don't need to nominate a particular category when you submit your Project of the Year entry. Our team will classify the projects, and we'll contact you if we're uncertain, and say, look, we think that this fits within continuous improvement. What are your thoughts? So don't worry too much about that. Worry more about telling us the story, where you were, what you did, what happened at the end, and perhaps what you learned, because that is really what brings a project to life. But a project could really literally be anything. A winner 2 years ago was Transdev Sydney Ferries, and they won because of their project to support people with disabilities and other needs to have a better access onto ferries. And they went through a huge customer-focused project to design new ramps that allowed people with certain disabilities to get onto ferries more easily. So that there is a customer-centric, customer-focused project. Or it could be something that you think is more traditionally customer-focused, like redeveloping a website, like redeveloping a service promise, like redeveloping the way you actually interact with your customers, or a complaint system. So, but it really could be anything you've done that has an impact on your customers and customer outcomes. So really looking forward to seeing what we get through in that category this year. As I click the next button, we've got this, repeating this again just to show you Woolworths, best of the best last year. Must be a mistake slide. How do we enter the awards this year? So it's a 3-step process. I've made it look really easy. It's probably a bit harder than this, to be honest. But you go to members.csia.com.au/awards, and I think May's going to pop that link into the chat anyway. Or you can go to our actual website and awards and hit the nominate button. That will take you to the awards portal. And the awards portal, anyone can access it. You don't need to be a member. It's open to everyone because the awards are open to everyone, whether you're a member or a non-member. There's essentially 2 things you need to download. One's a nomination form. There's an organisational one and an individual one. So organisational one for organisation-based entries, individual for individual-based entries. The nomination checklist, that's really important, because when you come to submit your nomination online, we're going to ask you for a whole pile of information, including things like company logos and headshots and all sorts of other bits and bobs, addresses of where you want us to come to visit you if you're selected as a finalist, and so on. So that checklist helps you collate all that information before you go through the process of actually submitting your nomination online. If I go to point 1, that's probably the most challenging part, but it's also one of the most rewarding. So that's where we ask you to address the judging criteria, and I'm going to go to the judging criteria very quickly, straight after this slide, I hope. We ask you to address the judging criteria. So we say, give us an overview about why you think this person or team or contact centre or project or organisation is worthy of an Australian Service Excellence Award. And then we ask you to address each of the 4 judging criteria. And I know Luke's going to talk about the judging criteria a little later as well. And again this year, so we used to ask people to provide 500 words per section, so 2,500 words. Again, this year we found it worked really well last year with a 250-word limit per category. It kept those entries succinct and helped our initial judging committee really find the people that deserved and were worthy of being shortlisting of finalists. And I must say that last year we had the highest calibre of finalists that we'd ever seen in the Australian Service Excellence Awards program. And I don't know if anyone was at the gala. I know Luke was and I was, but I don't know if anyone else online was at the gala last year. But we actually decided midway through the finalist judging process to award a highly commended trophy to, or a 3rd place in last year's awards, simply because of the calibre of the entries last year. So again, those short, succinct entries will really help us find the real cream amongst the entries this year. So that will be the hard work, but it's rewarding. And I said it was rewarding because that's your chance to go and reflect and work with the team and think, gosh, look how much we've done. What an amazing job we've done. Look at our CSAT. Look at our NPS. Look where we've come from. We can't wait to tell CSIA all about this. And that's the rewarding part that people often share with us, that it's not so much coming along to the awards gala, although people love that. It's not so much going through the finalist judging process. It's actually that process of actually submitting the entry and working with your colleagues and peers and thinking about the amazing things you've done and actually celebrating there and then. And that's really the heart and the essence of what this program's all about. Celebrating you, but you celebrating yourselves as well. So I've talked about the judging criteria, and I'll just touch on it very briefly here. May's going to pop into the chat for you a copy of the International Customer Service Standard. Now, you don't need to be an expert in the International Customer Service Standard to submit an awards entry, but it is a reference point and it's how we judge the awards. So every entry is judged both at the shortlisting process and in the finalist judging processes out of 40 points, 10 points for each of these 4 perspectives. So learning and growth, so that's all about culture. So how does the individual contribute to culture and build culture? Or how have you built a culture that's customer-centric and customer-focused? Operational, so how have you delivered consistent customer service? Or how has that individual done that? How have you actually done that? Service, so how have you delivered high quality? So how do you know what you're doing is what your customers want and is of the highest and optimal quality? So that's what we're looking for under the service perspective. And then performance, or the financial perspective. How does what you're doing for a customer, or how does what that individual's doing for a customer contribute to the organizational success measures? That doesn't necessarily mean profit. It could mean KPIs, it could mean stakeholder engagement, could be however your organization measures success. But can you link what you're doing for customers to organizational success? And that's what that question's asking. So that is the judging criteria. We'll certainly send you the copy of the full standard, because it's a great tool in any case. And I hope you all apply it to your businesses and departments. But that's the process by which we go about judging. The judges themselves, I mentioned earlier, are all selected from our community, and they go through a nomination and selection process. And all of them, if they're not already experts or briefed on the standard, we take them through a full induction process, so they fully understand not just what the standard means, but what a 0 to 10 means for their judging. So it's quite a prescriptive judging scale. To give you an idea, a winning organisation for a category is usually going to be scoring something like 32 to 36 from a judge, times 2 or 3 judges. Our lead judge gets a weighting on their judge because they might be seeing more people who have more experience. And so depending on how many judges we're using, that will roll out into something like 85%, something like that. So to give you an idea, it's very hard to get perfect. But to get those sort of 7s and 8s is what you're aiming to do for each one of those criteria. So I think I'm about to hand over to Luke now to have I gone for time so well? I said 20 minutes and it's 22 minutes. I do want to tell you before we go on the key dates and one other thing. So we've mentioned nominations open, have already opened. They close on May 31st. Finalists announced on June the 10th, and then judging commences on July the 22nd. Concludes on August the 30th this year. That's sort of a hard deadline for this year. And then winners are announced on October the 24th. And there's the Melbourne Cricket Ground celebrating at the Melbourne Convention Convention Centre in 2019, having a selfie with their Best of the Best trophy. Well done, MCG. If you're on with us today, congratulations once again. And this year we'll be holding the big dance at the Ritz-Carlton Grand Ballroom in Melbourne. So the Ritz-Carlton is synonymous with customer service. We use examples from the Ritz-Carlton in some of our training programs. And so with the Ritz-Carlton launching only last year in Melbourne, we thought it was an absolute natural fit that CSIA would be one of the first major events in their brand new ballroom. I can tell you this is one of the most beautiful hotels that I've been in, and I've been in some nice ones. And we've obviously had the VIP type experience and tours in terms of going through the venue selection, but absolutely beautiful. We will have a discount available for those of you who can afford to stay there, but let me tell you, it is at the pricier end of the scale. But we do hope to see you there at the Ritz-Carlton at the Grand Ballroom on the 24th of October. We'll be kicking off at 6 p.m. with drinks and canapes, and the awards and dinner will start at 7 p.m. So really hope to see you there this year. I do want to also mention one other thing. May, could you pop into the chat a link to an ICSS webinar that's coming up? If you want to learn more about the International Customer Standard, on the 20th of March, we're having another webinar with myself and Stephen Brett, and we'll be actually walking through all 24 elements of the standard one by one, and that will really give you a lot of insight into what the standard's all about and possibly help you with your entry. But what's going to help you more with your entry, what an amazing segue, is this next segment from the fabulous Luke Jamieson, our CX expert and thought leader, who I'll hand over to now.
Thanks, Jeremy. Hey, just some quick housekeeping note. There is one more question from Murray. Can you elaborate on the differences between operational perspective and service perspective?
Yeah, sure. So operations is essentially how you go about doing things on a daily basis. So what resources you put in place, how you actually go about delivering your service on a day-to-day basis. The other one is all about how do you design your products and services, and how do you measure the success of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. I hope that explains. And if you come to the website, Stephen Brett will tell you even more.
Awesome. One last thing, which is that the chat for everybody doesn't seem to be working. So what we'll do is we'll send the links that we had for the International Customer Service Standards around after this. Yeah, and I have just popped in the link to the awards site as a response to Murray's question, although that is not the answer.
Okay, that's good. Well, what we'll do is we'll send to all the people that registered all the links and information after this, but you might need to check your junk because it'll have attachments and links. Over to you, Luke.
All right, let's rock and roll. Awesome. So I thought I would share a little bit about the experience that I've had judging and sort of what I've seen over the years. And there's been a pretty consistent theme. And that is that people go down a couple of different paths. Now, you saw that there was a couple of different awards types. And what I've often seen is one of my recommendations is really choose the right category that you're going to go down. What I often see is something will happen in, say, a contact center where a big public blow up happens and you have to scramble as an organization to try and resolve that issue. And then you submit for, say, the best contact center award. But your submission is all just around what you did to scramble for this particular issue. And it's not really about the contact center holistically. So if I was to make a recommendation around that, would be maybe use the project category as something for that particular one. The other thing I see is that there's really two types of presentations. We see people go down the route, which is this, presentation type A. They take those 4 criteria that Jeremy mentioned before, and they just wedge everything into the box. And so there's no story. It's just this box that's ticking everything off. It's making sure that you've answered all of those questions succinctly, and you're just repeating back to us what you've done in the written submission. And so it's a submission, meets the criteria, but there's no heart in it. And so what I'd like to say is, we really want to hear you bring that to life. The second type of presentation we see, which is a bit more like this. It's everywhere. We hear this amazing story. You tell us all about the highs and the lows and this incredible experience you've just gone through, all the struggles, all the things that happened when 4,000 people called you on one day, and how did you resolve that, and how did you deal with that? But then you don't actually really tick a lot of the criteria. So there's criteria in there somewhere, but it's often very hard as a judge to try and find where that criteria was ticked. And in the moment, you're trying to process a lot of information. You're trying to take in the amazing story you've said, whilst also trying to evaluate this based upon a criteria so that it's fair and equitable for everyone who's submitted. So I wanted to give you some tips on how we can make 2024's presentation look a little bit more like this, where you get to give us all the color, tell us all of the things, but give us within a structure. So I thought the way to do that would be through telling a story. Now, some of you may have gone through some storytelling before, or corporate storytelling, and I want to give you a framework of at least one way of a framework that might help you make your submission this year. So I thought I would create this little story for you. So all good stories start at a beginning. In the beginning there was, once upon a time, this is that call to adventure. Now, this story structure, there's a number of different story structures you can choose from. There's converging stories that all happen, and there's different narratives that you can use. The narrative or the story framework that I'm using today is called the hero's quest, or a monomyth, where often someone sets out on a quest. It could be mythical. It could be the hero quest, where they're setting out to overcome something. And all these things happen to them, and they transform as the hero, as the protagonist, and they come back at the end of it changed. And that's a huge part of the stories that I see. Every year, people tell me about how they started in one place, something massive changed them, and they end up somewhere else. And so this is a great way to actually frame that if you don't know it. So the beginning is this call to adventure. The next stage is really telling us about who is in the story. Okay, so you'll see on this next slide what is known. So you're telling us everything that you know right now, or that you knew beforehand, and you're also introducing us to the characters, and those characters often include the protagonist, and then also, say, a mentor or a teacher. And so when I think about that from a criteria perspective, think about things like your culture. Your culture could be the character, and the quality that you deliver could also be one of the characters. They don't have to be physical people. They can be attributes to your story. So you could start with our culture before all of this happened was in a bit of a rut, and was not going great. And then what we decided is, we saw that within our quality framework, it was really driving these repeated behaviors to not actually align with the culture that we wanted to be. So we started out on this quest. We started out on this journey. And so your culture and your quality, for example, might become your characters. The next part is then to develop the plot. So lay out the story, lay out where things are going. What's the mission? What's the challenge that you're seeking? What's the mountain that you're going to climb, and that you were going to climb, and where did you set out? What was it that made you stop and think, what we're doing right now wasn't good enough, wasn't worthy of submitting had we not made these changes? And so this is that time to really share that story with us. One other thing I'd also say on that is, often when we see these submissions, the very first thing that everyone does is introduce who they are, and it's great. It's very polite, and it's nice. But I'd also like to challenge you a little bit and think about when you introduce some of the people that are in the room. And I know I'm going back a little bit to the characters here, but if anyone's ever watched Shark Tank, for example, a pitch usually starts with, have you ever wondered why this doesn't work? Have you ever thought, wouldn't it be great if? And they start with the whole story. They talk about the problem, and then they do the introduction. My name is Luke Jamieson, and I'm here from ABC to tell you how I'm going to solve your world's problems. And that's a great way to introduce why you're there. So there's a bit of a method as to when you introduce yourselves and start to tell that story. So when you get to that submission, not just in the written. So written is very much about, give us the facts, give us the things that happened, and when you get to present, though, that's about letting it shine. Tell us the story. So once you've introduced your characters and the plot and where you're going, then that's the chance to introduce the challenges and the conflict that lay ahead of you before you even set out. So set the size of the project, set the size of the challenge, and really let us get that context between where you were and then what you had to face. The next step, and so if we think about that in learning, what did you learn? What was the operational perspective? What was the service perspective? What was that financial perspective? What are the challenges? What are the conflicts in that space? We then go on to why you decided to actually tackle that challenge. So in a story, this is called the threshold. This is where someone chooses either to reject that or to take on that challenge. And if we think about some great stories like The Lion King, for example, Simba gets, he's the king, he's the future king, he's ready to be there. He gets ready to go, and then he chooses to step away. He chooses to move away from that. He doesn't accept that threshold at the beginning of that story. So this is the part where we want to understand. Simba goes through this whole self-realization. He grows, he learns all these things, and it's only towards the end of the movie he takes on that threshold. When does he take that? When does he accept that change? When does he accept that challenge? So this is what we understand. When did you accept the challenge, and why did you accept that challenge? Tell us about the growth that happened to get you to that point to take that leap. Now, at this point, this is where it starts to crescendo. They're climbing the mountain, you're watching a movie, you're thinking, yes, they're going to get there. And then all of a sudden it changes. Something happens and they don't quite reach that peak yet. The plot thickens. They see into the abyss. They walk through this valley full of the skeletons. It's this point in the movie, in the story, where there's no going back. You get to that point where we've started, we can't turn back now. We have to press through. Maybe this is where something happens, the protagonist dies or a major character dies. We don't want to see that in your submissions, but this is where things go wrong. Things don't go to plan. And we want to hear about that. We know that every journey you go on isn't all sunshine and roses. There's a lot of things that fall over in the road to success. And it's great to share them because they're great learning opportunities. And we want to hear about that. Next comes the big moment. So this is the time that you've gone through the hard yards. You've made the changes. You've implemented your new systems. You've changed your culture. You're ready to hit go on your new web chat program that you're just about to launch. This is the moment that counts. What happens in that moment? This is the revelation of all the things that I thought that I was going to change, all the things that I envisioned that we've set out on this mission to do. Is it going to work? Did it fulfill that moment? And so this is the part that, as judges, we're all leaning in. We're like, wow, did it happen? Like, what happened on day one? Did it explode? Like, tell us. So let us, build that suspense. This is that moment to tell us, did the test? Did you stand the test? Did you make it through that challenge that you set yourself? It's then that you start to understand why we did it. So this is this moment to then let the pressure out. The suspense has gone a little bit, but now, and we've all relaxed. We're not leaning on the edge of our seat. Our fingernails fingertips aren't white from gripping onto the seat. We've relaxed a little bit, and now we start to understand a little bit about the protagonist, about why this was so important to you. And this is where you can start to bring in those converging stories. They can be the customer stories. They can be your frontline agent stories. They can be your executive stories that tell us why this really meant so much. Why did you go through all of this pain? Why did you climb that mountain to get to this point? Just so that so that you could get to this moment. So this is about that sharing the impact, sharing the meaning, and sharing that personal story. And so when we think about converging stories, this is that great moment to bring in those stories. One of the sessions that Jeremy and I sat in on last year was really amazing. We got to they actually brought a customer in, and the customer was chiming in on all of the presentation and saying, actually, that was really amazing. Let me tell you how that impacted us as a customer, and that was really, really powerful. So this is those moments. I want you to really think about that in your story. How do you bring in those personal stories from customers, executives, frontline staff to bring it to life, to give that meaning, to give it that impact, and really hammer home why you went through that pain? Because if you just had to upgrade your system because it was sunsetting and you just did it, and we upgraded a new system and it all went pretty well and our customers are happy, cool. It's great that worked, but is it a great story? We really want to hear about the journey and why that deep impact. So then, and this is where I think a lot of Jeremy and I have talked about this, where a lot of the stories fall over. So they've shared the impact. It's all great, but then nothing changes for the future. So we don't hear about what's actually changed for business as usual. So these big moments of change, this new CRM you've just put in, this new culture that's just been created. What happened afterwards? What happened when the project finished? And what often happens in those moments is that the project finishes, or we go back to BAU, and we kind of often forget about what all that work that we did and why we did it. And so what we really want to see is how is that challenge, that big avalanche of calls, that moment in the media that actually just really had the potential to destroy your business. How did you learn from that, and how did that carry on to your everyday business? And then how did that solve future problems? How are you future proofing that so it doesn't happen again? We really want to hear how that's built into your business as a whole, as a culture. And then once you get back to the desk, this is thinking about how did this actually change the future? How is this going to impact you if you decide to enter next year? Because I think what often happens is we'll often see a lot of these projects, and they kind of just hit their completion just before the submission. And so it's pretty early days in the data. And we, Jeremy and I sat in on one last year that was very much like this. It was an amazing story, but the proof in the pudding hadn't really come through yet. And our feedback to the submission was that we'd really love to see you enter again next year, because if everything that you've done starts to show those results, we think it's going to be a really amazing story. So sometimes it is about timing. And that shouldn't discourage you, that if you haven't got the results that you shouldn't submit. I think you should, because it's a great learning process to go through the awards program. It's an awesome night, that's for sure. The awards night is dead set one of my favorite nights of the year. It's honestly the best event on the schedule. So it's worth doing. And you can learn so much, so that after you get that result, and after you've sat back down and you've reflected upon, that magical journal that you found in that treasure box, and how are you using that to change your life going forward? How have you come back transformed? How are you going to then submit for that next year? That's a really important step to take. Even if it's not part of your submission, it's an important step as part of the process for you as an organization. So that's the end of this, or is it? Is it the end of your submission? Once you've done that? Not necessarily. Sometimes this can actually just be the beginning of that next call to action. So you go through the process. Maybe you win, maybe you don't, but hopefully this whole process lights a fire under you that you want to submit again for the next year, because we know that customer service excellence isn't just a one-time thing. It's an ongoing growth. And gosh, the environment at the moment, and the digital environment is changing so rapidly at the moment. I can't imagine that anyone is going to be telling us the same story they had last year as they will this year. I think there's some pretty fast-paced moving things happening right now. So we're really, really keen to not just hear about what happened, but then what is that next call to adventure for you. And that is me done.
Thanks, Luke.
Questions, concerns, jokes, all welcome.
That was really good, Luke. I was really looking forward to hearing that. And I think that just one of the key things there for me that Luke mentioned it's one that I very much get feedback from judges all the time. Really telling that story, but it's about very much, as Luke said, a bit like on Shark Tank, when they say, "Have you ever thought of this problem?" and then introduce themselves. We often miss out on an actual frame up. Like, give us an overview of how your team fits into this department and this organization, who your customers are, what you do. And there's some kind of assumption that as judges, we already know what you do because you're a very well-known company. Maybe you fly airplanes, maybe you run buses, maybe you sell groceries, but we need to have a frame up. So often that's actually completely missed. Even the frame up of a project. Tell us why it actually fits into the bigger picture for your customers and for your organization. So I think that's one thing. And the other thing that I got from that, Luke, was very much the stories that have been told when we do have that cross section from all the stakeholders involved. So you have executives might come in or be part of it. Frontline, have an opportunity to talk to frontline or hear from frontline if it's relevant. Having customers. Customers come in many ways. I've seen it in many presentations over the past few years. So sometimes they might dial in. Quite often they're in the room and wow, they are advocates. The customers that come in, maybe they're the best customers, but they are real advocates, and it's a really powerful, compelling part of a presentation. So if that's something you're able to do or incorporate, absolutely recommend that. And if I think about what award-winning organizations do, they are very happy to allow judges just to question frontline without any other leaders or anything in the room. So give us 10 minutes with the frontline. So just to give you an idea of what's going on out there and what the award-winning organizations are doing. So I really appreciate you sharing that, Luke. Are there any, we've done really well for time, Luke. So I want to ask, we've managed to fix the chat issue, which was actually, of course, my fault because I'm not very good with technology. So May is now putting those items into the chat, but we'll still email it to you anyway. Another thing to do if you're preparing for the awards this year and you're in Sydney, or you could be interstate and have a good budget, but if you're in Sydney on March the 21st, we'll be in Sydney at CX Showcase. And what is CX Showcase? Well, CX Showcase is where we have winners from the previous year's awards come along and tell us how amazing they are and what they've done in little sort of mini TEDx type talks. So it's a breakfast event. It's in Sydney. All the details are on our website. May will put a link in to that particular webpage on our site. And I think it's limited tickets, so you'd probably need to get in quickly if you're interested in coming along. But this year we'll be hearing from winners from last year, including Australian Red Cross Lifeblood, BT. We've got the CEO of the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator coming along. We have JBro, their Customer Experience Manager, and they are two-time winners of Australian Service Excellence Awards for Medium Organisation of the Year. So we've got 5 organisations confirmed to be presenting who are all winners from last year's awards. Oh, HCF, two-time best of the best. And I know what Eric is going to be talking about. I'm telling you what, it's not to be missed. It's one of the amazing things that I learned and saw last year on the judging trail. So I'm really grateful that he's able to share that with a broader audience. So if you're looking for even more tips and tricks, absolutely get along to that event if you're in Sydney. Now, how are we going? We've got a few things in the chat. Is that May putting things into chat? Let me have a look.
Yeah, that's May putting
May
things
just
in chat.
pumping the chat. So okay. So Luke, I was going to ask you a question, seeing there aren't any more questions here at the moment. Thinking about your experience over, and how long have you been judging for now? 7 years?
Yeah, that's right.
7 years. So, I mean, we're really, really grateful. All of our judges are volunteers. Thinking about what you've seen over those 7 years, could you tell us what you think are, I know you've given the whole storytelling piece, but what do you think are your top 3 pieces of advice that an organisation can do to prepare for judges to come and visit them on site for a finals presentation?
Yeah, I think muffins is really good.
Muffins,
Coffee,
definitely.
No. I think it's particularly coming on site. Is really think about the what you're going to be showing us. I think often we're sort of placed in a room and because we just need a presentation, but bring it to life. Like, we do want to see some of these things. If we get the chance to walk through the contact center or walk through your operational area, that helps bring it to life and see the people and see what's happening. That makes it very real. It goes beyond just the PowerPoint. That's one. I think one of the other things is really to just really share the color in the data. Often we get presented with a lot of data without the story that sort of goes around with it. And so as a judge, I'm sitting there trying to analyze the data, and I'm not an analyst, so I'm sitting there trying to analyze data whilst listening to you tell me about it. But tell me the story as to why that the data reads the way it does. Otherwise, what happens is the likes of Jeremy and I start to ask lots and lots of probing questions that may actually not be relevant. It's more just to ease our own understanding of the data. And that actually uses up a lot of time. So be really clear. If you're going to give us data and big graphs and spreadsheets and everything and present that, really have a story and a talk track to go through it, not just, as you can see, we started at 20 and we ended up at 50, but in between all of that, there's all these spikes, and we're going to ask about those things. So think about, if you're going to share data, think about the story that's going to go with it. The last thing is give yourself time at the end. So give yourself time at the end for questions. That's a really important time for us as judges to really understand some of the things you've presented to us. Often people will do a presentation and have it timed so that it starts from the second we walk in to the second we walk out. And we kind of walk in the rotating door and out the other side, and Jeremy and I and the other judges will often go and get a coffee and just be like, whoa, man, I had so many questions. I wish I could have asked this, and this. And we're all saying the same thing, and it's just a shame that we didn't. And I think the best presentations definitely leave time at the end.
Thanks, Luke. And I agree with all of that. And I think that everyone should really think about Luke's third type of presentation, the ideal presentation, with all the color, but meeting the criteria. It's really unfortunate when you walk out of a presentation, you love the people, you love the story, you could see it all, but they just didn't meet the criteria. There's just no way we can score them so that they'll actually win an award. And it is always really disappointing to walk out of that sort of presentation as well. So thinking about having the color, having the story, but making sure you achieve the criteria. So how are we going to get as many points out of 40 out of each one of those judges that walks in, knowing they've got a prescriptive scoring scale? So even if we like you a lot and your coffee and your muffins are amazing, we're forced to score a certain way. So that's
a good point. And I think one of the ones that we saw last year, Jeremy, was that I thought was really good, is that they did tell a great story, and then throughout their presentation they had the little icons of saying the CSIA icons of the 4 different criteria, just in the corner of the screen, showing that this is what we're addressing at this point, and that helps us do that mental tie-in as well. So really think, use those things, those tools to guide your story.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. I agree with that. Well, look, if are there anyone else have any questions? We had actually really good attendance to this today, so really thank everyone for coming along. So, and we've had webinars, this launch webinar, with only a handful of people. There's dozens and dozens of you online today, so really appreciate your time, and hopefully we've answered some of your questions and given some color as to what can make an award-winning entry in 2024. If you have any other questions or would like to reach out to us privately, by all means do so. You can always contact me. Feel free to contact Luke. May's got his LinkedIn for Luke Jamieson to pop into the chat if that works as well, now that the chat's working. And so she can certainly do that, but certainly feel free to reach out to me, Luke, or any of our Friendly Awards team. May and Jay lead that team, and there's also my wife Danielle, who's the lead judge. Thank you, Murray, for your comment as well. Really appreciate that you thought it was a good presentation. Well, with that, I think I'll stop my share, which is always fun to do, and give us all a little bit of an early mark. Thank you all very much again for attending. Thank you to May, and thank you very much to the amazing Luke Jamieson. Much appreciated.
Thank you. If you're in Melbourne, stay cool.
Yes, absolutely. And if you're going to Taylor Swift this weekend, have fun.